Hey, Bradley Zardegger here, and welcome to Overkill Unearthed, where we dig into the past and pick some albums that we haven't yet reviewed on Overkill Reviews, probably because they happened before Overkill Reviews was even a thing, and then we review them now. Speaking of now, we would love if you would hit the subscribe button now if you haven't already, and if you have the means, we would love if you joined us on our Patreon campaign now. Thank you very much. Today I'm reviewing an important album from one of death metal's most fun-loving bands. Today I am covering the Black Dahlia Murder Ritual, which came out on June 21st, 2011 on longtime home Metal Blade Records. Seriously, they're still on that label. And they were from their first album. My first taste of this album came when the band unleashed Moonlight Equilibrium as like a pre-release song, and I was just stoked. I was huge into this band back then. They were one of the earlier bands to get me really into death metal, along with Bloodbath, and that song just had me very excited. Funnily enough, as time has gone on, what I like about this album, what I like less about this album has shifted, and that's what I'm going to discuss today. A lot of reviews of this album actually found people who were previous naysayers of the band coming around, saying that they were expanding on their sound, they were doing something different, they were bettering themselves. I'm sure that was done with purpose. The band's vocalist, Trevor, actually ranked their albums from least favorite to favorite for Kerrang, and he put their last album, Deflorate, as the second lowest spot, with two main criticisms. A couple of his reasons included the fact that he thought that they went too technical on that album, and in doing so they lost a little bit of their dynamics, and that the opening song on the album just kind of started. It didn't feel like an opener, it didn't build slowly and get you excited for the album. I love that opener, Black Valor, but I get it. As I said, I believe that the band had a mission coming out of that. With that self-awareness, I'm sure that they took those critiques of their own work and they applied it here, and maybe that's why it was so well received. It's time for me to examine that. Fortunately, the band did take these self-critiques to heart and learn from them. The opener of this album, A Shrine to Madness, swells with these strings before making way for these deadly trem picks, and then eventually they go to the kind of trademark string-skipping melodic death metal riff that they became known for. An over-reliance on that kind of riff and that kind of song could have really sealed their fate, and it wouldn't have gotten them that kind of redemption in the eyes of a lot of the more critical metal press. But yeah, they learned from their overt technicality and the lack of dynamics, perhaps somewhat ironically, from the song A Selection Unnatural from the last album, which is a tech death song through and through. So while that song embodied the overt technicality of the last album, it showed that they could do something different and should do something different to shake things up a little bit. That's not to say that there aren't classic Black Dahlia Murder songs on here. The aforementioned Moonlight Equilibrium and Conspiring with the Damned are examples of those. In fact, they may actually be slightly more upbeat and happier than what you're used to from Black Dahlia Murder, maybe a little bit more Dark Tranquility or In Flames than the melancholy of At the Gates. But what's best about these songs is how they frame the one that they bookend. On Stirring Seas of Salted Blood comes right in between them. Trevor says in that Kerrang piece that he was initially wary to put this song, which he calls a slow, morbid angel slimer of a song, near the beginning of the album. It's track 3. But it does add dynamics to this part of the album. It's got this lurching feel that feels like the waves hitting a ship. It feels very thematically appropriate. And then the band end the song with some chanting over one of the main riffs. You know, it really transports you onto the ghost ship on which the lyrics are based. I mean, hey, I guess pirate metal can sound as bleak as a life at sea really was. Sorry, Ailstorm. My favorite part of this album, personally, is this trio of songs right in the middle, which I will say is the best 1-2-3 punch of any Black Dahlia Murder album ever. Carbonized and Cruciform feels even more black metal than Nocturnal's bleakest moments. Think like, you know, Dissection style. But what really gets me going is the atmospheric break in the middle, complete with piano and acoustic guitar. Again, dynamics, dynamics, dynamics. And that goes right into the most mind-boggling tech death riff that I've ever heard from these guys. And straight up, I'll be real, one of my favorite riffs ever. They go right from this black metal, tech death, like up and down, again, dynamics, 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 song into this energetic drum and bass led song, Den of the Picarist, which is basically a hardcore punk song. They more or less use the guitars as like this weeping texture, especially at the beginning. And then it closes with these urgent sounding blast beats. It's like a minute and a half. It's sick. Closing out this trilogy, we have Malenchantments of the Necrosphere, which opens with this staccato, off-kilter, decapitated style chugging. The song is kind of a companion to On Stirring Seas in terms of, you know, being on the slower, groovier side of things. The aching strings on album closer Blood in the Ink work really well because they're utilized in the band's death metal rather around them, you know, as an intro, an outro, a break. It shows a higher level of ambition from these guys. There's also a really nice lyrical nod to the album Slaughter of the Soul by huge influence on these guys at the gates. It's worth mentioning that every member here is at peak performance. Trevor proves that he is one of death metal's finest poets, even able to make the most gruesome of things sound, if not beautiful, at least graceful. Brian riffs along with the best of them here, and I feel like he's energized by the addition of relative newbie Ryan Knight, who really gets a chance to spread his wings here, more so than he did on Deflorate, where he was even more of a newbie, like very, very, very new. And Knight's solos really shine here. I know there was a lot of criticism of the Black Dahlia Murder up through their first 3 albums that a lot of their solos sound the same. That was not so much the case on the last one, but that's really, really, really not the case here moving forward. And the band's beloved rhythm section of Ryan Bart Williams and Shannon Lucas deliver a mammoth of a final performance for the band. They would leave after this album, but like, what a way to leave a band with this. My criticisms of this album are few, but hey, we're reviewing, so I have to point out the weaknesses, even if they're relative. I guess the songs that are more the Black Dahlia Murder formula, they tend not to hit as hard here. I guess the band has just reached peak execution here. It almost feels like it's so easy for them to write a song like this, and it seems like they devoted a lot of the darkness to the experimental tracks on here. That's not to say the likes of Moonlight Equilibrium, Conspiring with the Damned, or The Window are bad, but on repeat listens of the album, I'm much more likely to skip their jovial riffing for more of the darkness that makes up the other songs or rituals on here. Each of the songs in brackets has a ritual. It's ritual of whatever. And I feel like the dark songs really embody that more so than some of those ones do. To me, the desperate energy of a song like A Grave Robber's Work stands tall as an example of what can be accomplished when Black Dahlia do as Black Dahlia does. The song Great Burning Nullifier feels like a lesser version of Malenchantments, you know, with more of a focus on like the chugging off-kilter kind of side of things. But lyrically, and maybe it's a straight edge kid in me, but a song about weed just doesn't do it for me. It's beautifully phrased by Trevor, you know, makes it sound very elegant and graceful and stuff. And maybe I'll even break edge. Probably not, but maybe, but probably not. But yeah, even the bong bubbling throughout the solo feels really gimmicky in a way that Black Dahlia just usually aren't, and I think shouldn't be. When Ritual first came out, it felt like a compelling case for the Black Dahlia Murder continuing to cement their legacy as one of modern death metal's most consistent bands. Apparently, it also brought a lot of converts from previous naysayers. Looking back now, it also marks a turning point as a band stepping slightly out of their comfort zone on half of each of their albums, and in doing so, expanding their sound without fully losing what made them in the first place. Because of that, I would say that it wasn't just on this album that it made the, more traditional Black Dahlia Murder songs feel like tame and safe in comparison. I'd say that's the case moving forward. Take, for example, a more recent album like Nightbringers. Two of my favorite songs on that were Jars with its like Deathspell Omega style dissonance, and Kings of the Night World, which is just rocking and dare I say even has a little bit of a hair metal influence on it. I consider this album a turning point where Black Dahlia Murder really started expanding their sound, tapping into this boundless creativity. But they've done so, as I said, in a way that keeps them centered on who they are, but allows them to bring in those extraneous influences. That Deathspell Omega there, that rocking hair metal there, that who knows where they're gonna go in the future. And that makes me more excited every single time they put out an album now that I've seen what they're truly capable of, and I think you can really blame this album for that. As much as the band's third album, Nocturnal, holds huge nostalgia to me and was uncontested as my favorite Black Dahlia Murder album for a very long time, this one is neck and neck with it. Even more so when I consider the risks and resultant rewards that the band took here. So I would argue that this is the most important album in the Black Dahlia Murder's career. It's a bold turning point in their discography, and I'm going to give it 4.5 skulls out of 5. You may or may not remember this, but the Black Dahlia Murder back in the beginning of their career were tagged as a metalcore band or a deathcore band. Deathcore band, no bueno. Metalcore, sure, they had a little bit of early Prayer for Cleansing influence on their early albums, but they really grew beyond that. Another band who did something similar was Job for a Cowboy. Sure, they were deathcore on their first EP, but I really want to recommend their third album, Ruination, as just a similar style of growth from a band that nobody could have predicted. Beyond that, just do your research on cool death metal. I've got this shirt on from Pull the Plug Patches from 1991, like all these crazy good albums that came out in that year. And if you're looking for more modern stuff, Black Dahlia Murder vocalist Trevor has a column on Metal Injection called The Obituarist, where he basically just tells you everything cool and new that's going on, and specifically death metal, but extreme metal as a whole. So, what do you think about this album? What do you think about the Black Dahlia Murder? Where do you think this ranks in their discography? Do you agree with me that it's a huge turning point for these guys? Do you think that they're a modern classic death metal band? Do you think I should talk slower? My grandma thinks I do. She tells me all the time that I talk very fast, but maybe her brain is just too slow at comprehending the cool stuff that comes out of my mouth.